to Sitting with Sally. Today I have with me Rory McMillan, who is a City of Kenora councillor, and I'm very happy to have you on my show today.
Thank you, Sallie. Thank you.
Rory and I have been talking about getting together for, I say 2 years, but you say it's not quite 2 years.
It's okay.
No,
2 years. If it's 2 years, it's 2 years.
It was a lot of prodding.
That's right.
So we were, just before the show started, I was asking you if you are one of the longer sitting councillor members.
I think within this group and the past number of years, I would say yes. Mayor Canfield and I are probably pretty close in time to when we were on council. Dave, I believe, started in early 1990s in Jeffrey Malik as a councillor, and then he evolved into being the mayor there. I started on council in Kenora in 1994.
And this, of course, is going back to ancient history because Jeffrey Malik, Kenora and Keewatin
Yes.
amalgamated in 2000.
Year 2000. So Dave, just speaking a bit about amalgamation, prior to amalgamation, we had what we called a transition board. So that was an interesting dynamic. There was the three mayors on there. There was Dave, who was Jeffrey Malik, Calvin Winkler, who was the Kenora mayor, and I believe it was Jack Pearson that was the mayor of Keewatin. And then we had the respective clerk treasurers on this transition committee trying to work towards how we were going to make a new city or a new community work.
And which bylaws?
Which bylaws and some of the logistics about it, and working with the province to bring it forward. And of course, all three of municipalities were a bit protective of our turf, and not all three municipalities came in willingly, and so it was a bit of a transition. It was a very interesting year.
It was a flavor of a time. I think the province was going
Yes.
around making a
Yes.
lot of municipalities amalgamate.
Yes.
And I arrived shortly after that, and I remember that some people weren't sure it had been a good thing.
Yeah.
But I think
Yeah.
moving forward, it probably was.
Well, I believe it is, because we're three together, we're stronger. We have better negotiation power with the province and the federal government. We can become a stronger community as we share our resources, because each municipality brought a lot into amalgamation. And in fairness to the residents, we're sitting in Keewatin now, or the former Keewatin, and a lot of residents here feel very strongly about their community because it was a tight community, and it remains a tight community.
I was going to say, Keewatin
Yeah.
still has kept
Yeah.
its identity,
Yeah.
which is good.
And I say this in a very supportive fashion. One of our municipal councillors, Sharon Smith, always has kind of got that beacon light there to ensure there's fairness and equity when it comes to the municipality of Keewatin, and then others look towards Jeffrey Malik. So these things are important because we're still relatively young.
Yes.
As one city.
Yes. Not knowing
Yeah.
whether we belong to Manitoba or Ontario.
Well, that's another discussion.
So, Rory, I asked you because I thought you would be a good person to reflect back on changes that have happened in Kenora, because there's been a lot of changes. I moved here 16 years ago, and looking back, I've noticed it. You became a councillor in 1994.
1994, yeah.
What made you decide you wanted to become a city councillor?
That's an interesting question, Sallie, and one I've thought about in my younger years and in high school. And after high school, I often thought about politics, municipal, provincial, or whatever, and I thought it would be an interesting challenge. And then as life evolved, you put it off to the side. But there was something happening in the community at the time that kind of served as a real catalyst for me, and that was that the council of the day was considering closing the library on Main Street in the old Carnegie building and moving it to, if you know where Market Square is now, there used to be an old grocery store there, a Loblaws grocery store that had closed, and the building was still there, and there had been consideration by that council to move the library in there, somewhere in that space, and actually either sell or lease out the existing library for a gift shop or some kind of a retail outlet. And I thought, no, this just isn't right. And I know a number of people in the community were upset about that discussion and that possibility. And I was an avid user of the library, just enjoyed going in there as a community resource. And I knew the staff at the time were quite upset. So we decided to, a group, kind of challenge the city on that and to keep the library there, and then that evolved into an expansion committee. But the long and the short of it is, I thought, yeah, if I'm on the outside and I'm going to start complaining about how decisions are made, maybe I should try and make the step forward and decide to run for municipal council to participate in the decision making and see how things work. And if I've got strong feelings, then I can put them through at the council table. So that was kind of the catalyst for me, and then
Here you
evolved.
are 24 years later.
Yeah. So I thought, I never thought it would last this long, but it's been an enjoyable and challenging road.
I do think the decision about the library was the right one. It's a lovely building and it's great, but it's right downtown.
Yeah, and just I know I'm sidetracking a bit, but places like the library, the museum, these community facilities are cornerstones in our community. And when you go into the library, it's not just so much taking out a book or a video or doing it online, but it's a gathering place for people. And the staff there are excellent. People come in, homeless people that don't have anywhere to go during the day, they'll come in and they'll go through the newspapers and the books and have a place to relax, and the staff are very supportive. So it is a great place.
Yeah. No, it is.
Yeah.
Along the way, and we've spoken before, things have changed over time of Kenora. Can you just talk about some of the changes that come to mind?
Well, I've thought about that, and I guess one of the coming into Kenora, one of the views or pictures that people often remember is coming in and coming past the hospital, and then all of a sudden you hit all these old boathouses, and there was even homes on the other side of the highway coming in. And the council of the day back then had a vision, and they wanted to change the waterfront and change it from one of like old derelict boathouses and to kind of make our community an inviting community. And through their vision and through the work of their council and funding opportunities, that evolved into, started evolving into the harbor front we have today.
How long ago was it that
I'm trying to think, Sally. I was going back in some of my material. I would say it would have been sometime in the 1980s, but I could be very corrected on that.
Okay, so, and then when I first arrived, they had the circus-like tent that went up and down. Yeah. So the boathouses were gone, but they...
Boathouses were gone, parking lot was there. Then they had that area, then they had a play area for kids and coming in there, and then it was decided to place the tent for special events and special activities.
They had that walkway going over the road too. And that evolved to the latest changes with the white pavilion.
The pavilion that's there. And that, the development that took place with the harborfront and removal of the boathouses, that was under Mayor Calvin Winkler's term on council.
It'd be interesting to see if it matches his vision, because the boardwalk is lovely.
Yes, yeah.
So we're going to take a short break, and then we'll come back and talk about other changes in Kenora. Welcome back to Sitting with Sally. I'm chatting with Rory McMillan, City of Kenora Councillor, and we're talking about things that have changed in Kenora while you've been a councillor, I guess. And we know each other from many, many different committees and things, and we often have talks about housing and how there is a need for housing. I'm wondering if I can get your thoughts about some of the housing issues.
Sure. I think there's different sectors of the community, Sally, that we have to look at with regards to housing. Clearly, for our seniors, because our demographics are such that we're evolving into a senior population. I'm a senior.
I was going to say quicker than we want.
Yes, yeah. So we're looking at more supportive housing to try and support people, and so they can keep their independence and providing some support services. So there's that sector of the population that needs it. The other is our younger people who are coming to the community that may want to start with a small home or apartments or units, and it's through building of condo units that are in town. Prior to starting, we were just talking about the small development in the old school in Norman, and as people at my age consider moving into apartments or supportive living and downsizing, that frees up the housing for younger people that we can attract to our community. And that's our economic development at the city is working, just released a promotional video and attracting young people. Sure. But the other sector that's important to me as well is social housing, and providing housing for low-income sector of our community, and how we can do that, and working with agencies. And the partnership the city has with the Kenora District Services Board is one that's a very positive and a progressive one, with their director, Mr. Wall. And it'd be interesting to have him sometime talk about housing.
Yes, it would, and just to give a kudos to him, because Kenora District Service Board and Knox United have got together for a permanent shelter, which is excellent.
Yes.
Yeah. But and Kenora is part of a whole Northwest which has a huge housing problem, in that the vacancy is less than 1% all across. So it isn't just Kenora, but
no, and nationally we have a housing shortage. The pressures on government, provincial and federal, for housing funding, and for us as a city, what do I see as our responsibility, if that were the question, or what's our role? I think our role is working very clearly with developers, the District Services Board, in trying to ensure that we can make property available. And the city has adopted the motto, not so much, well, you need this, you need that, or for zoning or whatever. It's more of, how can we make it work? What can we do to help make this work and move it forward with housing? Because the city does not build the houses.
And are you optimistic that more houses, more units will be built in the future?
I'm optimistic based on the premise that I know city staff is working, like our economic development staff and city staff are working with potential developers to look at that. And of course they can't speak in much detail because it's confidential discussions with developers, but I'm optimistic that we're going to move forward. Probably not at the pace that people would like or that I would like, but I'm optimistic, and I'm optimistic about the social housing sector, which is important.
And I'm going to step back again, because I'm sure people are interested in a role as city councillor. And can you just maybe, what advice would you give someone who's interested in becoming a councillor, or what advice do you wish you had known when you first became a councillor?
I've thought about that, given a lot of thought about it. For me, I'll start with, what advice would I have liked? I think what I would have liked is to say, basically the question, do you know what you're getting into? And in asking that question is taking more time to study how the city functions, how decisions are made, the process, what our relationships are, what the role of a councillor actually is. And in saying that, a councillor does not manage staff. A councillor does not get directly involved with how snow removal is done, for example, which is usually a hot topic in the winter. So those sort of things I would have really appreciated knowing. But in fairness to the city, they do their best to give an orientation to councillors when they come on board. It's something that you're motivated to get involved in, and you get in there, and you have to be. What I wish I had known is just the self-decision to step back and ask questions as to how it operates, and take that time. What would I suggest to somebody that wants to run for council is to give it very serious consideration from a time perspective. Take the time to try and understand some of the new legislation that is out there with respect to protocols for council, codes of conduct for council, conflict of interest issues that can come up, and understanding those dynamics. And just to review, and if I were new and running now, I think it would be important for me to really analyze the reason, why am I running for council? What is it that I really want to do? Do I want to make a change? And if I want to make a change, how do I want to make that change?
And I think we also mentioned this earlier, that if you are thinking of running for council because you have one burning issue, that might not be a good reason to step forward.
That's an excellent point, Sallie. Mostly, like when you asked me what motivated me to run for council, well, it was the library issue. So there's usually one issue that motivates you, but it's critically important that don't let that one issue cloud your judgment when you get involved in council, because there is just a myriad of issues that are faced with, and you've got to do your best to try and keep an open mind. And if you just focus on that one issue during your term at council,
you're not doing the job
you're
fairly
not doing,
to all the
you're
other
not doing
issues.
the job of a councillor, and you're not.
So you councillors are really your decision makers. Your responsibility is the oversight of decisions that staff bring to you, I presume. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's fair. Council gets involved in development of a strategic plan, and revisiting the plan on a regular basis to try and set some goals and objectives
So again,
for the city.
visioning.
And staff take that direction and go away, and they bring back the information to council, and we try and set a pattern where we can go, and that also allows staff the direction to move ahead. And this happens each year through budgeting, through our capital budgeting process, but more so through the visioning and the strategic planning process. And the other part of your question, the only employee that council really has is the chief administrative officer. That's our level of responsibility for staffing. Then the CAO's responsibility is for all the other part of the organization. So through the CAO, we have a positive interaction with staff and know how and understand how the operation functions.
Yeah, so I guess it's a hierarchy similar to a board of directors.
Yes. Yes.
With CAOs, you flow down, and then it flows down to the staff from the CAO. Yeah.
And then I think the other part of it, our decisions, when you asked about making decisions, our decisions are based on reports that come forward and policies we have within the city. If many issues that come forward get emotional because people are interested, people are concerned. The library was an example. There's other things. The shelter was. And at the end of the day, when you try and separate, because the pressure comes from the community on the emotion, focus on what does your policy say, and what is the actual decision you're making, and try and focus on that.
So again, you're looking at legislation and rationale, and and trying to keep emotion out of it, but that must be difficult sometimes. I'm sure it is.
It's difficult for all of us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Again, we will take another short break, and please come back and join us to hear more of Rory's life as a city councillor. Welcome back to Sitting with Sallie. I have Rory McMillan with me today, city councillor for Kenora. And during the break, we were talking about how Main Street has evolved.
Yes, that was an interesting story, and I'll give you my perspective. There was a group in the community, and I'll try and keep this story short. There was a group in the community of business people that were started out very interested in how can we get more garbage cans in strategic locations in downtown. And funny as it is, then they started meeting, and then more people started getting involved in this this small group, and the city became involved, and it evolved much broader than that. And the city planner at the time started talking about, well, how can we change the look of downtown and still address, you know, our because some of the operations staff were very concerned about our infrastructure, the sewer pipes, they were old, very old. So our planner at the time, and can I mention names?
Sure.
It was Jeff Port, and he did some research along with some of the group, and then that's how the Kenora Biz evolved, and through that. But there was a project in Owen Sound called the Big Dig.
The Big Dig, I like it.
That was going on at the time. And so the planner researched this. We started looking at opportunities for funding, worked in partnership with economic development at the city, and did a combined project to look at if we can dig up the infrastructure and change the infrastructure, then maybe we can address the aesthetics of the main street. So this evolved. It was a community process. Businesses were consulted and talked about because it would be disruptive for quite a period of time. A small group went out to Banff, Alberta, because they had gone through this, and they were a similar tourist-type town. So consultation took place, and lo and behold, the project started, and it had its bumps and hurdles, but basically it went ahead. It was completed, and now it's just like it's a part of the community. Like all the history is past history. But it was a significant project that started off with a few people sitting in a back room with a vision.
I was going to say, interesting how visioning
Well,
turned into reality.
Absolutely. And if I may just jump back to an earlier question you had about what would I advise or recommend to somebody considering council is be open to visioning. If somebody in the community comes forward with a thought, don't dismiss it right away. See where it can go and share it with people and see how it builds.
Well, I think that visioning has been very successful. Kenora is a very pretty town.
It is.
It really is,
Yeah.
and that has enhanced it.
Yeah. We're very, I grew up in Kenora, and I had no desire to go away. Went away for a short time to get schooling, but I really do love this community, and it's a passion for it, and a lot of people do.
Yeah.
And
So the City Council has to build partnerships
exactly.
along the way too.
Exactly.
Can you talk about some of the partnerships?
Sure. Partnerships to me are absolutely critical, whether they be with the business community that has happened, and the Kenora Biz evolved out of that. But one of the things to me that I think can be most successful for the community is building the partnerships with Indigenous community. And I've seen that evolve over the past number of years. They are critical partners. We are on Treaty 3 land, and they keep us going as a community. The surrounding First Nation communities do their commerce here. They do their trade here. This is their land. We share the land, and the partnerships that are evolving are very strong. I think you see that with the street signage that the city has promoted and staff have promoted, the new wayfinding signage that has the traditional Ojibwe language, the sharing of the flag at City Hall with Treaty 3, and just many of the discussions that are taking place. And is there still issues in our community? Absolutely. But can you see some of this growing and evolving? I feel it's really growing stronger, and relationships are becoming stronger.
That's a very positive.
Like a small example is small or large. We just passed the first step to proceed with the potential of twinning the ice surface. When we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, the Grand Chief, Francis Kavanaugh, came to our meeting because he's interested to see, is there potential for partnerships here? And we'll talk. We'll sit down at the same table and talk. We wouldn't have done that years ago.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Visioning, what do you see or what do you hope our changes will reflect?
I hope the visioning continues. Who's ever sitting around the council table, I know that our staff and community members will ensure the visioning is there in whichever manner. I see our community continuing to grow. I see changes continuing to take place. If I may, Councillor Mort Goss has been a very strong advocate for visioning for the downtown. So we're going to look at potential of a revisioning exercise for the waterfront area, and much of what we talked about at the break, and see what the potential is there for the community, for our residents, as well as attracting people.
Yeah. Yes, the waterfront is a major asset. It really is. Yeah.
And then working with the businesses and housing, visioning on housing, that's a partnership. And I think continuing the visioning with relationship building is absolutely key.
I also think that Kenora has been one of the more successful communities that has transformed from a community whose main industry was mill at one time to now it seems that one of its main industries is tourism.
I appreciate you saying that about our community. And we've been very fortunate with our physical location where we are, our proximity to Winnipeg, attracting people here. The closure of the mill, when it did occur, it did have an impact. It impacted families, it impacted individuals, but not to the extent that it did in other communities. And people seem to pull together and continue to move us forward with tourism. And it's interesting, we've evolved from mining, fishing, the woods industry, and that's still alive. And part of that will still continue, and as how we move into tourism, whether it be attracting people to our lake or all other aspects of tourism.
So I think the last message is, if you haven't come to Kenora, you should come and visit it. And if you live here, you're pretty lucky.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
And please join Sitting with Sallie again.